Welcome to the Drum Shuffle, a podcast offering insights, perspectives, and conversations for drummers. I'm your host, Jamie Eads.
Hey, how's it going out there, everybody? Welcome to the Drum Shuffle podcast. This is episode 146. Happy summer, everybody. It is officially summer now. I hope everybody's having a great week out there. I hope you have more outdoor gigs than you can handle in your schedule. I wish it were true for me, but I do have a few gigs coming up later this summer, which is great. Hope everybody's doing well. Thanks so much for joining us. We're going to be joined once again by our good friend, Peter Kogan, right after this message from our sponsor, Los Cabos Drumsticks. The best kept secret for drummers is finally out. Los Cabos Drumsticks may look like the sticks you grew up with, but these are not your father's drumsticks. Los Cabos Drumsticks is Canada's #1 drumstick brand, and they are coming to a retailer near you. With operations in over 28 countries worldwide, thousands of drummers have already discovered the Los Cabos difference. Using FSC certified wood from Canada and the US, Los Cabos make the finest quality drumsticks, percussion tools, and accessories on the market. The best news, Los Cabos Drumsticks offers you a ton of choice. They have 22 individual drumstick models and 14 percussion tools, many of which are available in 3 different wood types: maple, white hickory, and red hickory. Red hickory comes from the center or heart of the hickory tree and has been independently proven to be both stronger and more elastic than white hickory without adding a lot of weight. While most drumstick manufacturers have shunned red hickory, Los Cabos Drumsticks has embraced it, becoming the only established stick brand in the world to offer a full line of red hickory drumsticks. To learn more about Los Cabos Drumsticks, visit them online at loscabosdrumsticks.com, follow them on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, and don't forget to ask for Los Cabos Drumsticks at your favorite retailer. Dare to be different. Join the Red Hickory Revolution with Los Cabos Drumsticks. All right, guys and girls, as I mentioned before the break, we're going to be joined once again by the great Peter Kogan, who has a fantastic new record coming out this week on Friday, the 24th. Peter's new record is entitled Just After Midnight. Peter is just... You guys already know. He was on the show back on episode 63, and I hope you caught that. If you did not catch episode 63 with Peter, it has a lot more of his backstory than this one. We wanted to really focus on the new record, but Peter has been classically trained. He's been playing in many, many different symphony orchestras throughout the country over the years. Just a phenomenal classical player. But he's also a wonderful jazz player, and I have had the opportunity to listen to this record quite a few times. He was so gracious enough, to send over an advance copy for me to listen to, and I've been thoroughly enjoying it. Fantastic sounding record as always, just a great listen, and I encourage all of you to go out and pick up a copy whenever you get the chance on this Friday, June 24th. We had a great conversation with Peter, talked all about the record. Again, it's called Just Before Midnight by Peter Kogan. I know you're going to get a lot out of this, so help me welcome back to the Drum Shuffle, the great Peter Kogan. Hey, Peter, welcome back to the Drum Shuffle.
Thanks, Jamie. Good to be with you.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess the burning question is, how are things in the great state of Minnesota?
Well, right now it's beautiful weather. It's finally turned to spring, and we've got flowers and we've got green on the trees finally. It's a late spring here.
Yep.
And things are going well. Things are okay.
Good. Well, I know that, it's playoff hockey season right now, and unfortunately the Minnesota Wild have
They're gone.
Have gone home. Yeah.
Right.
So
the Twins are playing great, though. It's been fantastic. Yeah. So we have that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thanks so much for taking time to come back. I appreciate it. And, the last time we spoke was in 2018. You had just put out the brilliant, the Green album, which I loved. It's still in the rotation here at the Eads household. Yeah. Well, and you've got a new record out. But before we get to that, let's talk a little bit about, what's been going on. And obviously that is, this global pandemic that we've had. But the last time we had you on, you had just recently retired from, I want to get this right, the Minnesota Symphony.
It's called orchestra, but that's the idea.
Okay.
Orchestra.
Okay, so you had just recently retired from the Minnesota Orchestra, but you were still doing some, timpani work there locally, but you were really just looking forward to doing some jazz gigs, and then essentially the world shut down. So
That's right. And things were going pretty well as far as, getting gigs and having some groups that were pretty stable, considering the freelance nature and of the jazz scene in a town like here, in most towns, the guys who are making a living or almost making a living at jazz are taking whatever gig comes their way. So to put together a group that will stay together is a little bit tricky. But just before the COVID struck, I had a potential engagement at the Iowa City Jazz Festival, and I was, getting gigs booked around town with a pretty stable quintet, and then everything got canceled. All the clubs, and bars closed down, as they did everywhere, and it took a year for things to get back on track, and so starting, when was it? When did it hit? 2020, 20 was a wash. And at that point, this gets to, I guess, my new album, because I had a lot of time at home to try and figure out, what am I going to do with myself? I can't go out and play gigs, and I had a backlog of ideas, of compositions, jazz tunes, that I had some idea I wanted to write down, and I was able to spend a lot of time, composing and arranging my material. And by the end of the year, by 2021, I had pretty much an album worth of material to think about. So starting last summer, 2021, before the new various waves started re-hitting, all the clubs open, and we got some wonderful full houses with the quintet and my septet, and I was able to start performing the new material, and then then things got worse, as you know.
Yeah, right.
So once again, with the Omicron and the Delta variant, all that stuff, I did manage to get a final gig with my septet in December, and now that I had all this material, I thought it was time to get another album out. And in January of this year, I went into the recording studio. We had three nights of recording, and we got everything on the new disc down. And it was very exciting. And then, of course, 2 months of mixing and mastering. I mean, that it just seems to take forever. But we got it all done by late April. And so the new album called Just Before Midnight was released then. And that's the album you got.
Sure.
So I guess I was able to survive, having worked as a classical musician all those years in a very solid orchestra here based in Minneapolis. I was able to get a good pension, good musical pension, and it kept me going. And my wife was working as well at the same time, so that helped enormously. So I kind of forced myself to compose and to arrange and to get my stuff together that I didn't have the time to do when I was scuffling for gigs.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I know that, your first instrument as a child was violin, if I'm recalling correctly. Mm-hmm. So it always begs the question to me, I don't have the composition chops that other guys have. And it amazes me, when I listen to the new record, where does this come from? Could you do this without, the other instrument being in your life? It's hard for me to imagine sitting down. I can't remove the drummer brain. Right? If that makes sense. And I'm always thinking of everything from a rhythmic aspect, but this is a very melodic, beautiful record. Where does that come from? Could you do it solely from a percussionist standpoint?
That's an interesting question. I haven't really thought about it quite like that, but, I did study the piano. I kind of got frustrated with the violin because I didn't want to practice it. So I kind of got attracted to the piano because I could always sit down and fool around on it. And I started taking piano lessons. I was very fortunate to have a teacher in my early teen years who was more like a keyboard harmony instructor than a piano teacher. He did a lot of ear training with me. That was totally invaluable, as you can imagine.
Sure.
And of course, I studied the percussion keyboard instruments, the marimba and the xylophone and the vibes. And so I kind of, when I started getting interested in jazz, I would get those Charlie Parker transcriptions and play it on the marimba, things like that, So that really enhanced my jazz abilities. As far as my compositional skill, well, I never really studied composition, but I think years of listening to music, it just kind of got absorbed. That's the best I can say. And I found that, my ideas were almost a relief from the playing of classical music, which was a little bit overly structured, I think, for me, but hearing all that great music and having it really in my head must have had an effect on my ability to compose. Because there are these classical music is got a lot of long forms, not the 32 bars, but you have, extended phrases and all that stuff. And that must have had an effect on me, I just figure.
Yeah. Well, and that leads to another kind of line of questioning, I guess. And that is a lot of guys that come from classical music, when they do compose a record or two or three or however many records they compose on their own, sometimes it's stiff and it doesn't swing and it, and it doesn't have these great melodic runs the way your music does. So, I have to think that, that you must have two brains or or at least two motherboards or something. I don't know, but
right. Well, it's to some degree, I may agree with you. I mean, I because I was listening to jazz as a pretty young kid and loved it, and playing on the pots and pans, on the floor and stuff like that, just like a lot of drummers who were attracted to rhythm. But we also had, at the same time, a huge amount of classical music going on in my house as a kid. So, and I was certainly encouraged more with the classical, but my parents didn't mind me going out and playing gigs, with the local, dance bands, basically.
Sure.
So I did have that duality going on. And it went right up through my first years in music school, where I was still doing an occasional gig with my cousin, who was a blues guitarist, So then I had a long stretch, of course, in the classical field. But I think I may have mentioned in our last interview where around when I was in about 30 years old, I was playing with the Pittsburgh Symphony, and my friend David Friedman, the great vibraphonist who I had been in school with, came to Pittsburgh and did some gigs, and I was able to sit in on drums with his group, and I had such a good time. I said, I gotta start doing this again.
Sure. Yeah. Well,
so I left for 6 years in New York. I was freelancing as just a drummer, basically put the classical stuff totally aside. So coming back to it again after leaving the Minnesota Orchestra in 2015, it's been pretty much, this is what I want to do. I want to play the drums, and the writing was also something that I had been doing when I was in New York during those years. So I just took it up again.
Yeah. Well, and whatever catalyst you can find, right? I mean, for that creative outlet is a good catalyst. I mean, I've said to, I don't know how many people over the years, look, it doesn't matter whether it comes from, the happiest day of your life, the saddest day of your life, whatever you can use to create is a good thing to use, right?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I just let it come to me, basically. And then I try and use my skills to make it into something that I would want to hear, that I would want to listen to.
Well, and mission accomplished, I spent, the weekend with the record, and, I have found it to be just, I mean, it's a great listen. It truly is. I really like, there's some play on words in here, but I really dug I Dream of Danny playing guitar. I love it. It's so brilliant. And it starts with the piano, and, it's just a brilliant listen. And, I think you composed, of the 9 songs, you composed all but one, and then you kind of did an arrangement on that, right?
That's correct. Well, I'll tell you a little bit about I Dream of Danny. And this was probably just last October, because it's the last tune that I wrote. And I actually dreamed of Danny, who is Danny Kalb, who was, in his day, he was pretty well known. He was the founder of the Blues Project, which was a 60s kind of blues revival band. And he's in a rest home in Brooklyn, New York, and he's fading, and for some reason I dreamed of him just sitting on a stage and playing this tune, and I jotted it down in pencil. I happened to have some manuscript paper not too far from the bedroom, and just jotted down the tune. And like this has happened before to me, and then I go back to it maybe a week later and try and determine if it's something worthwhile, and so it very quickly turned into that whole tune with the bridge added and a little intro and so on, and a fade out, and and I wanted to make sure I didn't steal it from somebody else. Peter,
it's 2022. That is so, yesterday. We just rip everybody off nowadays.
Right,
it's fine.
Right, yeah. Well, but I did check out a few other, tunes that I thought might sound similar to make sure that I wasn't really ripping anybody off. And so, yeah, I think it sounds the most like Gordon Lightfoot, frankly. But I don't think I actually ripped him off, so I feel good about that. Anyway, what that's doing on a jazz record is another story. But we had a lot of fun playing it, and I have such wonderful musicians on the record. These local guys, everyone on the record is from Minnesota, except the pianist who plays the piano piece that ends the album. And these guys are so talented and did such a great job for me. I'm very thrilled. And I was able to get most of them for the CD release engagement, which...
and that's coming up here soon, right?
Yeah, that's June 11th here in St. Paul, Minnesota, at a place called KJ's Hideaway. And very happy about that. It's a kind of a storied place because it used to be called the Artist Quarter, which was founded by a drummer named Kenny Horst. And I don't know if you know Kenny, but he's a veteran jazz drummer who had this club, the Artist Quarter, which was moved around. It was in Minneapolis for a bunch of years and then 2 different venues or maybe even 3 in St. Paul. He ended up in this basement area and became stable. It was a great place for a club. And then it changed hands. And then KJ's took it over, and it's been operating again for about 6 months, and it's doing great. So very glad to be in that storied place. And got most of the guys to come and play with me on that engagement. So
that's great.
I'm very excited about that. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and, I think we talked about this the last time you were on the show. A lot of listeners, worldwide might be, I think it's hard for people that aren't Americans to understand the vastness of the United States, right? I mean, I've had friends come over from Europe and they'll be in New York and they'll be like, well, we're going to come down to Kentucky and see you. And I'm like, you realize that's a 14-hour drive, right?
Yeah, right.
So, I think it's lost on folks, but a lot of people listening right now are thinking, a jazz scene in Minneapolis, St. Paul? Really?
Yeah. There's some wonderful people out here. There's a guy named Max Santiago, who's a drummer, by the way, who opened a place called Jazz Central Studios, which is kind of a nonprofit where people can go and try out their stuff. And there's a rehearsal space there, and it's a little downstairs place. It doesn't serve any food. It's just and they get a crowd to come in there, and they've been streaming live throughout the pandemic. And the other thing that happened is that the Twin Cities Jazz Festival started streaming live too. So starting last summer, even before last summer, they started doing streamings, and they do all kinds of safety protocols for the players. So you see a lot of players in masks and barriers and all kinds of stuff. But no one got sick so far from these things, and this has sort of kept things going in this town. So it's a small bunch of people, but by New York standards, but they're very dedicated. There's some wonderful players out here.
Well, and I just think that, I've had so many great drummers on this show from the Twin Cities, and there's a rock scene, there's a funk scene, there's, a jazz scene, there's a blues scene. There's just so much great music in, Minneapolis, St. Paul area. It really is, the great north, of the states, the music scene. It's so incredible.
Right. Well, the drumming wise, we had Marv Dahlgren and Elliot Fine, of their famous four-way coordination book. And those were guys I worked with, and they both played with Minneapolis. Well, and then it was called the Minneapolis Symphony. Then it became the Minnesota Orchestra. So both those guys were around and teaching. So that's certainly part of the drum scene here. And there's quite a scene of great musicians in this town. And fortunately, not as many venues as there were like 30, 40 years ago, but a few, and they keep going.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it's just, I'm so glad to be a small part and shed some light on that scene up there. Everybody automatically thinks New York, LA, Nashville, right? That's just
right.
And that is the heart of the music industry in the States, but there's so many great scenes elsewhere. Atlanta has a great scene. Of course, you guys, Minneapolis, St. Paul has a great scene. Vegas has a great scene. There's just there's so much more to it than just the big three. Truly,
absolutely.
It's amazing.
Chicago, Detroit, San Francisco, all these towns have wonderful scenes, great music being made. So,
yeah, for sure. Well, and you had mentioned earlier that you recorded this record in 3 days, which is amazing to me that you can get 5 guys and girls or 7 guys and girls. That's essentially 3 songs a night, right? And
it was right. It was a week, basically 3 weeks apart. One Mondays, 3 Mondays in January. And we were able to do the quintet and the 3 of the. Let's see. I think there's 2 quintet tunes. One is "Pow Pow Pow Yeah" and another thing. And then we did the quartet called "Ode to JC." So that was the first session. The second session was the other. Let's see. We started doing the septet tunes on the second and third sessions, and with a little bit of patching up. So we were able to get all 8 tunes done. The piano piece was recorded out in California by this wonderful pianist who I only knew from seeing a music video that he had done a recital with my stepson, who happens to be a violist. So I was able to hear this wonderful pianist, and I asked him if he'd do this piece, and he did it. So that's how that got done.
Sure. Well, and I would imagine that you had to do, on your own as the composer of the majority of these tunes, you had to do quite a bit of, pre-production stuff to make sure, the arrangements were what you wanted. And I would assume you charted out a lot of this stuff or at least some rough sketches for folks just to make that recording process go a little bit smoother, right?
Right. Well, one of the things I made sure is that we had played everything. So starting in the summer of 2021, I started playing these tunes live with my various, bands. Some gigs with the quintet and some with the septet. And I made sure I got a couple of those under my belt so that I could make sure all the tunes were working. And the arrangement process would go on a little bit, in terms of we play a tune and I'd say, no, this needs that. So I'd rewrite a little bit of it. Everything was charted out, except for and the blowing changes were there for the improv sections. So I'd have to correct the parts, when I changed it. And even when we got to the recording sessions, there were some last minute things I thought of that I changed, but, the guys read well, and so once I explained what we were going to do, they were cool. They just did it, and it was great. It made things optimal for me as a composer and arranger.
Sure. Well, and that comes back to the 2 brains thing, because coming from classical music, to be able to shift from that rigid, hey, you're going to read this on the fly kind of thing to a little bit more laid back sort of, well, this arrangement is malleable, what works for you guys. I think that's just, I find that interesting, how you can go from one world to the other, seamlessly. It would be hard for some guys, I would assume.
Yeah, I guess so. Certainly, but the fact is that I worked so long in the classical thing that, for instance, now the only time I do classical gigs maybe a couple of times a year, and it's almost exclusively Baroque classical music, which it has the similarity to American jazz and pop and whatever, because it's motor rhythm. It's rhythmic music.
Right.
And when they write for the kettle drums in Bach or Handel, it's part of a rhythmic usage of the instrument. So it's not that different. It's almost like the kettle drummer was the kit drummer of the day,
Right.
And it's sort of a climactic use, but it's always a rhythmic use.
Right.
So in that sense, I still enjoy that, and I build little Baroque timpani, and I play on my own drums, and so that's a big plus for me, to be able to use them.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah, it makes total sense. So you've got the release thing coming up, and I noticed on your website, which I'll go ahead and plug now. It's peterkoganmusic.com. I noticed that there's some other engagements that you have throughout the summer. Is it the hope of you to be doing this music, for I'm assuming a period of time until, the next composing takes hold, I guess?
If I ever write again, Jamie, this is, you never know,
right,
when it's going to stop. But what I've been doing is I've been booking, after this CD release engagement, I haven't booked the album material on a gig specifically. So my next gig after the CD release is at a club. It's actually a brewery called the Metronome, and it's in St. Paul, and I'll be doing that with a quintet. And we'll do a few of my tunes, but we'll also do a lot of standard jazz tunes on that gig. Okay. I'm looking forward to that tremendously. And after that, what you probably saw on the website, I started this in February, almost as a lark, because I was working with these wonderful young players, and I was brought up on bebop. When I started listening to jazz, I started listening to Bird and Diz, and everyone around them. And I really wanted to play that material, and I occasionally do one of their tunes on a gig, and I have a couple of Charlie Parker and a couple of Charlie Parker tunes and a Diz tune on the Green album. But I thought, what about just doing a gig where we just go through their material, So I put together a Bird and Diz legacy band with some wonderful young players, and we did a gig in February, and I started thinking, let's keep going. Let's look at some more tunes that they wrote, because there's quite a few, And so I was able to book another Bird and Diz legacy gig back at Jazz Central Studios, and another one's coming up that's not even on the website yet. That's going to be what they call the Atrium at Orchestra Hall, which is like a post-concert serenade. After people filter out of the orchestra concert, they can go to this rather large room where they serve drinks and hear my band play. So those are coming up too. And later on in the summer, I have a gig with a wonderful saxophonist named Brian Grivna, who was Buddy Rich's lead alto sax player in the 70s. Just a phenomenal player who's well known in this area of the country. And so we're doing a quartet gig backing up Brian. So I have these things that I can do to keep my hand in and keep playing jazz without necessarily pushing my own material. I'll probably give it a little bit of a rest after I do that CD release gig, and then maybe pursue some more.
Gotcha. Well, and I know that the the album is available, all over the place. And I'm not sure, did you do a physical release as well? I mean, if somebody wants to get it in physical form, can they?
Yes, they can. I don't quite understand a little bit about what's going on with, for instance, CD Baby, who has put out the album, and there's a site that they have called Here Now, and my album is available on Here Now for downloading. But I believe CD Baby is offering the actual disc for sale. They have certainly asked me for how much it's going to cost and things like that. But it also can be purchased directly from my website, peterkoganmusic.com. People can go there and actually purchase either individual tracks or the whole album digitally, or they can order the CD, and I will get it to them as fast as I am able.
Sure. Well, and, here's going to be my, get off my lawn speech that I give to everybody, when we're talking about new releases. Buy the physical copy. Spotify and Apple Music, all that stuff is great, but Peter will certainly reap a little more reward, not a lot, but a little bit more reward. If rip it into your machine and then use it for a coaster. It doesn't matter. Just get the physical copy. That's
okay. Amen, brother.
Yeah,
I appreciate it very much. Very much.
That's what we want to do there. So, I'm just glad that there's good music coming out. And, this has been such a weird stretch of 2 years, essentially. I predicted at the, towards the end of 2020, I said 2021 will go down as the year that more artists released more new music than any other year in the history of mankind.
Yeah, it's true.
And it looks like 2022 is going to be a pretty prolific year for folks putting out new music. I mean, I think when the gigs stop, that's the only creative outlet any of us have is go to the studio, right? Let's record.
Yeah, that's right.
And technology is such a way now that, you don't even have to be in the same room, essentially.
Right. Well, did you ever try, during the lockdown period, I was trying to get this thing Jam Kazam going with friends, and even locally, it didn't work terribly well. I think it works okay for slower music, but as soon as you get a groove going, things get messed up.
Yeah, and I don't know. My own crew of guys, we tried using some of that stuff, and if everybody doesn't have the exact same pieces of gear, it's almost impossible for the timing to sync up. And if somebody has a bad internet connection, it just doesn't work. And right. I just think there's no substitute for having people in the same room doing their thing. And thankfully that's opening up quite a bit now.
Yes, much better.
It was just such a weird time, and for the first time in the history, the 30 plus year history of my band that I've played in all these years, we actually recorded some stuff where none of us were in the studio at the same time. So I went in and played to a click track, and then the bass player put his part down. Then the guitarist came in, and we had some pretty good success with that. But there's nothing that can substitute for, in our case, the five of us being in the same room at the same time playing music together.
Yeah, no question about that.
It's just been such a weird time, but, I'm so glad that, you've got this new record out. It's a wonderful record, and I'm going to recommend to all of my listeners, pick up a copy. It really is a great listen. And I wanted to ask, you said you grew up in the bebop thing, and I know that all of these songs were, quintet, septet kind of arrangements, but I hear a lot of big band influence in there as well. Does that make sense? Does that resonate with you at all?
Oh yeah, because you remember the Neil Hefti Count Basie album with the atomic bomb on the cover? I must have worn that out, with Sonny Payne, and that stuff is definitely in my head. Not to mention some earlier music, because one of the first records I got hold of was this big band from the 30s. Blank it out. Hang on a second. Jimmy Lunsford's band.
Okay, yeah.
Which was the other great band along with Count Basie and Duke Ellington. Jimmy Lunsford might have been the number 3. Great arrangements and great band. I listened to those things endlessly, and I think it just had an effect. Sure, it's in there,
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I just, I think the record is well worth a listen. I listened to it, like I said, over the weekend a few times through, and was listening to it again this afternoon, on my drive, and just it's such a good sounding record, and the songs are, I think a lot of folks, when they hear, a new jazz record, they're like, well, it's, it's not cookie cutter jazz. This is very melodic. It's a fun record to listen to. So I give it 2 thumbs up, and
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kudos to you guys for getting it done.
Thanks. I just, want to say that, one of the things that I'm disappointed in the current era is the way everything is sampled, or just, people make their own playlists. But I remember listening to jazz albums as a kid and listening it from top to bottom, and hearing the sequence of tunes was important to me. And so when I started doing my own records, I wanted to have the kind of record where someone could sit down and listen to the whole thing at once, and maybe be reading the liner notes like I did as a kid, just sort of following through this sequence of tunes and how they go together and how they contrast. And I guess the other thing is, as a drummer, I wanted to have a variety of drum styles. I don't like playing the same thing for every tune. So my writing sort of reflects, I'd like to start writing some stuff in 5. I'd like to play some 5. 5/4, 15/8. So there's two tunes in 5 on the album, which if it's not noticeable, that's good.
Right. Yeah.
But I tried to have a lot of variety, so it wouldn't be repetitive in terms of the feels from one tune to the next, and that's sort of what I was trying to do.
Dave Brubeck and Joe Morello, they didn't patent the 5, right? I mean, it's been
absolutely not.
It's been around for a while. So, I mean, I think the record is really good, and I'm hopeful that everybody will give it a listen, and for my listeners up in the the greater Minnesota area, go out to the gig. It's
okay.
That'll be great too, and tell Peter that I sent you. That would be fantastic.
I'd love that. Have them talk to me, by all means. Anyone shows up.
Yeah, for sure.
Hello.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, we're going to send some folks your way. Again, it's peterkoganmusic.com. Peter, I always enjoy having you on the show. So when the next one comes about, you say, if I ever write again, I know you will. So when the next one comes around, we'll have you back for a third one. It'll be great.
Oh, okay, Jamie. Thanks. Appreciate the talk and the support.
Yeah, for sure. Keep us posted on everything that you got going on, and we'll share it with our crowd, and hopefully we'll get some folks out to these gigs. Peter, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you, Jamie.
All right, we'll talk soon.
Bye.
All right, guys and girls, that's going to wrap up episode 146 of the Drum Shuffle podcast. A sincere thank you to each and every one of you for tuning in. We simply cannot do this show without each and every one of you doing so. each and every week. It helps us more than you'll ever know. So thank you. Special thanks to Peter Kogan for taking time out of his schedule to come on and talk about his new record with us. We always enjoy catching up with Peter. If you haven't done so already, link up with Peter at his website and go grab a copy of Just Before Midnight this Friday, June 24th. You're not going to regret that. I also want to thank our sponsor from the very beginning, Los Cabos Drumsticks. They're on my mind today. I just got a fresh case of sticks in today. So thanks to them for helping us bring the show to each and every one of you. If you have not checked out their sticks, please do so immediately. The best drumsticks in the world, in my humble opinion. As I ask you each and every week, go ahead and hit the subscribe button on whatever platform you choose to listen to podcasts on. It helps us more than you'll ever know. The biggest thing you can do to help out the show is to share a link with a friend. Simply send them a link to one of the shows, one of the episodes, and say, hey, check this out. That helps us to continue our growth process here at the Drum Shuffle, and we do appreciate it. I answer every single email that I get. Our email address is thedrumshufflepodcast@gmail.com. You can always find more information about me over at jamieeads.com. And the web address for the Drum Shuffle is thedrumshuffle.com. Again, thank you guys so much for tuning in. We simply can't do it without you. We have other episodes coming up over the summer that you're not going to want to miss. So make sure you hit that subscribe button. So until next time, may your head stay strong and your sticks never break. Cheers, everybody.